For those that don't know, Burn the Witch is Tite Kubo's newest title. The protagonists include Noelle and Nini, who work as witches in reverse London. You can actually read the first chapter of the new manga on Viz's website, which I'll link in the description below. As a quick note, if you haven't read the one-shot of this manga, you should be doing that before you watch this video, as I'll be referencing specific events that happen in the one-shot. I forgot to mention that I'll also be making Bleach references. They aren't necessarily important to be able to understand the story, so please bear with me if you don't understand what I'm saying. So here on the first page we see the three main characters, basically Noelle, Nini, Valgo, and Sushi. Even in the title page, you can see how well Kubo really focuses on facial expressions and body language to portray some of these characters' personalities. You can see Noelle really has that calm, serene kind of look in her eyes for facial expressions, and you can also see that Nini is a little bit more headstrong, impulsive. It has the sort of confidence that Noelle doesn't really seem to be showing. And also in the back, you can clearly see Valgo and Sushi are meant to be the comedic relief characters. You can see Valgo clearly having more fun than both Nini and Noelle. Aside from the characters themselves, you can clearly see Kubo spent some time trying to build up the world. Like, just looking at the buildings, you can see that they're pretty modern, and there's also a sign that says, "Don't abuse dragon, let's eat animals." From this, you can assume that dragons play a huge role in this manga and in London in general. Looking down at the title, you can also see that Kubo really thinks about what he wants to portray. The witches obviously being Noelle and Nini, and blowing a new pipe, meaning there's some kind of change that will affect both characters in this chapter. So here at the beginning of the chapter, we see Nini starting off the dialogue instead of Noelle, who started the last dialogue in the one-shot. And here she talks about how fairy tales are full of it because the person who is receiving the spell or is being benefited in some way knows that the magic is going to wear off soon. Now, since this is the first chapter, obviously we don't have enough of this character to really say anything about her motivations or beliefs. But in my opinion, I think Kubo's trying to parallel the monologue that Nini is going through right now with the way she lives her life. You know, she's a witch on the side, but she's also a student, a teenager who has to go through the things that a teenager normally goes through. And it's all fun and games for her when she's a witch, but when she's done with her work, she's done with what she has to do, she goes back to this boring life of becoming a teenager, of being a student, and having to deal with real life, basically. Now, I think this dialogue at the beginning is really important to setting up these characters. You know, the way these characters interact with the world and how the world interacts with them is also really important, that this beginning part is really trying to show us. In Noelle's monologue, she's walking through the streets clearly unbothered by anything. People are actually talking among themselves about her rather than them approaching her directly. And in Nini's monologue, Nini's walking through a bunch of people. It's kind of a more chaotic setting, and people are trying to talk to her directly about her life. At the end of her monologue, Nini is shown using a kind of token coin thing that opens the floor, leading into reverse London. Now, in reverse London, we see Noelle actually trying to deal with some kind of deer-like creature that eventually turns into some bird-like creature. Throughout this confrontation, we see Noelle kind of using Keto-like spells that Bleach used. You can see this with the long incantations, the number spell that she's using, and also the name of the spells themselves. Now we see Noelle kind of having a hard time with this bird-like creature until Nini shows up and uses spell 44 Flash Bumper. Now Noelle and Nini are able to take care of the creature. And after the fight, we can see that Kubo didn't really change the background for these dragons and for reverse London. Now here we see Nini and Noelle kind of having some kind of argument about money and rewards, which weren't really present in the one-shot. Now here we see Nini and Noelle notice Valgo and Sushi just kind of flying around, causing havoc. And the chief, Billy, from the one-shot who got transferred to Sabers, is back as chief again and says that they need to save Valgo or else he'll actually end up dying this time. Nini declines at first, but then agrees after the chief says that they got exactly what they wanted by agreeing to get approval for overtime and bonus achievements. Sushi and Valgo are saved by Noelle and Nini before Sushi can touch the resident whose house they crashed into. But Noelle asks the resident to do an exam that measures dragotoxin, which measures the amount of contact a human is made with a dragon. If dragotoxin levels pass a certain threshold, they become dragonflad like Valgo has in the one-shot. Fortunately, the resident passes the exam with stable dragotoxin levels. Noelle asked Valgo to remember that Sushi has the tendency to sprout his wings if Valgo sneezes, laughs, or is in danger due to dragonclads attracting dragons by their nature. Inconveniently, a dark dragon shows up. Noelle calls the chief and asks him to set up a dragon blockade, which forms a barricade around Rutherford Street, where the dragon and Noelle and Nini are. And we see that even in their world, there's a reverse London BBC that makes an announcement about the blockade. Noelle attempts to ask the chief to switch places with Sabers before Nini hangs up the call, not wanting to be outdone by Sabers. Here we see that Nini really wants to get into Sabers, but Noelle doesn't really care about getting in, and the two continue their fight with the Dark Dragon. Now here we cut back to Wingbind HQ, where Kubo introduces members of specific divisions, almost like the Soul Society captains, where they specialize in different areas like healing and research. In Bleach, the members say it's been a century or 96 years since they let a Dark Dragon into reverse London, and that they shouldn't have let Valgo get off scot-free for becoming a dragonclad. And the chapter ends with Punishment Court member Wolfgang/House saying that the same idea has been bounced in his division, and that they will start the process to eliminate Balgo. Overall, it's pretty clear to see that Kubo's evolved art style from the beginning of Bleach to the end has shown up in this chapter. For example, we can see that characters like Balgo look like Ichigo at the end of Bleach, and Wolfgang/Hout looks like a mix of Yamamoto and Ewok. Again, we can also see that the world building in this series is really just reminiscent of Bleach, with Kubo introducing a lot of characters just in this first chapter and in the one-shot that have their own pasts and motivations that will eventually be revealed as we continue in the story. Something interesting to note is the fact that Hollows and Dragons really do take on the same role in terms of storytelling. Dragons and Hollows are supposed to be the adversaries to Soul Reapers and Witches, but while Hollows really can't coexist with Soul Reapers, the Dragons here look like they can actually coexist and actually benefit the Witches, as shown in both the one-shot and Chapter 1. As for whether Balgo will actually be eliminated or not, I think Kubo won't kill him off since he serves a pretty important narrative role in the development of Noelle and Nini. He could be a potential leverage just for Noelle, and there's potential with Nini as well, as she's starting to warm up to him a bit more in this chapter. These are just some of my thoughts, of course, so until then, we'll just have to rely on the next chapter for some answers.